Welcome everybody to the office hours for database upgrade and migrations. This is our September edition, and my name is Roy Swonger, Vice President for Database Upgrade and Utilities. That means my groups develop the database upgrade scripts and also what we call database utilities, which includes data pump, SQL loader, transportable table spaces. With me today is Bill Beauregard. Bill, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure there, Roy. I had to fumble a bit there to get myself unmuted. Yeah, hello, I'm Bill Beauregard. I'm Senior Principal Product Manager that joined Roy's team some months ago and supporting doing product management for the utilities.
Great. So the person not with us today is Mike Dietrich, who is delivering a full-day upgrade workshop on the west coast of Canada as we speak. So today's topic is going to be about database upgrade recommendations, which were published earlier this week, but also just a little bit about how to keep up on the latest database upgrade information without having to scour through My Oracle support, or what used to be called MetaLink, and spend lots of effort on that. I do want to mention that the timing of today's office hours at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific is different than we've done previously. And this is something we've tried doing over the last few sessions, where the previous session, Mike Dietrich delivered in EMEA, basically in a time zone that made the most sense for Europe and over into India. This one we're doing in a time zone which would make more sense for people on the west coast of the US. So we're trying to kind of meet the needs of a global audience here. And if there are times that work better or worse for you, then you can always submit that kind of information in the chat here or in our in the Ask Tom questions section. So now let's get to the brief presentation that I have, and then we'll open up to questions after that. So the first thing I want to talk about is a slide that we display fairly often when it comes to upgrades, and that's the lifetime support policies for Oracle. And you can see where we are with this vertical red bar with the arrow here late in 2018. And we're approaching the end of the waived extended support period for 11.2. We're not that far from the end of waived extended support for 12.1. 12.201 has been out in production now for some months, actually over a year, I guess, on for download on all platforms on premises. 18C is available right now for download on Linux, Solaris, and Windows, but not yet for HP UX and AIX. And then 19C will be coming out later this year on cloud in beta form, and then in production will be beta earlier in the year 2019, hence its name. So this is the kind of thing that as time marches on, upgrade recommendations will change, and it's always going to be based on a few things. What is your current version, and what is your support status? And your support status encompasses a few areas. So let's talk about the details here, and then I'll get to our current recommendations for upgrade. What you see is a bit of a screenshot from this MOS note 742060.1. It's a very important MOS note because this is our release schedule for current database releases. And in the lower parts of that note, there is this table of specific information about each release down to the patch set level, or now what we would call an annual release level. So the first thing to note here is if you're on 12.201, the patching end date for 12.201 is July 23rd of 2020. That was based on when 18C came available for on-premise platforms like on-premises platforms like Linux, Solaris. That means that if you're on 12.201, you can comfortably stay on 12.201 until 19C comes out, and you could upgrade. You could skip 18C, upgrade to 19C, no problem. But now let's look at some of the other releases that are available. For example, on 12.102, those extended support fees are waived up until the end of July 2019. That means that if you're on 12.102 as of August 1st of next year, if you want to get your quarterly updates, your patches, and so on, you would need to be paying extended support, which is a 20% uplift on your support fees. And similarly, at the end of this calendar year, 11.204 goes into paid extended support. So that means as of January 1st, if you're running 11.204, if you want your security patches, if you want backports for any new fixes, then you would have to be paying for extended support one way or another. And then finally, if you are still on one of the other many versions that are out there, you could still be on 12.101. That's pretty rare. Most of our customers who went to 12.101 immediately got 12.102 when it came available. But we do still have customers on 11.203. And if you're on one of those releases, you need to be aware that you're not supported right now. You don't get any new bug fixes, even for high priority security vulnerabilities. And in fact, if you look at 11.203, the patching end date for that was more than 3 years ago now. So it's been more than 3 years of security fixes and other fixes, many of which were already in 11.204, and it's really time to be upgrading those to the most current release you can. Now, I mentioned that the other aspect here is support status, and that has to do with three things. The first is that you can pay for extended support. As I mentioned, it's a 10% uplift on the first year of extended support, but because we waived the fee on the first year of extended support for 12.102 and the first 3 years for 11.204, then the second those go into paid extended support, it's a 20% uplift on your support fees. One thing that you may not be aware of, because it isn't widely known, is that if you have a ULA, which is a universal license agreement for your company or your organization, then you can get extended support added to that as a zero-cost addition to your ULA, which means that you essentially get extended support for free if you have a ULA. Now, if you don't know whether you have a ULA versus a named user or per processor license, then please just talk to your account rep and they will be able to tell you. But that is something that many of our largest customers have. And if you are at one of these customers that has thousands of databases, that's a very valuable aspect of having a ULA, is getting that free extended support. But the other thing to think about for your support status is application certification. And I don't like being the bearer of bad news, but if you're running things like eBusiness Suite, well, eBusiness Suite is certified on 11.204 and 12.102, but it is not certified on 12.2, and it's not certified on 18. I don't expect them to certify eBusiness Suite on another newer release until 19C comes out. So that will put our eBusiness Suite customers in a predicament of needing to get extended support in order to wait for 19C before they upgrade their databases. If you have any questions, more questions about that, please just shoot me a note and I can give you the person to talk to about any concerns about eBusiness certification or database support underneath your eBusiness Suite database. So based on all of that, we worked with the support team. So this was a joint recommendation between Oracle support and Oracle development to come up with official recommendations. What do we recommend that you do right now based on what version you might be running or what you might have on support? And as you can see in the lower right, the source for this is the My Oracle Support blog, but this is the official blog for My Oracle Support. And this is a recommendation note that went out, just looks like the middle of last week. So it's very simple. It's basically, if you have extended support, which means if you're either willing to pay for it or you have a universal license agreement and you're on 11.204, 12.102, we recommend you just wait for 19C to come out. And the reason for that is that 19C is the long-term support release for the 12.2 family. Both 18 and 19 are really part of the 12.2 family. They're really 12.202 and 12.203. And 19C is the release that gets extended support, so you can migrate to 19C when it comes available, and you'll be able to sit on that for a good 5 years or more without having to upgrade if you don't want to. If you're on 12.2, you also don't need to upgrade because you can comfortably wait for 19. Now, if you are on 11.204 or 12.102 and you do need to upgrade, either because you don't want to pay for extended support or you just have some other reason that you need to upgrade now, then go to 18C. It's a good choice. It is really the first patch set, as it were, on top of 12.2. It's really 12.202 with a different name. So that would be the choice for people who have to upgrade now. So that's really it for the upgrade recommendations. I did want to add in a little bit about earlier releases. If you're on 11.203, 12.101, you're not going to have a direct upgrade path to 19 anyway, so you should be upgrading right now to 18C if you're on 11.203. If you're not certified, if you've got some application that's not certified on the available latest releases like 12.2 and 18, contact your account team and they can give you options of how to deal with this. It may be that we, Oracle, can work with our third-party ISVs to help get them certified on newer releases, or it may be that we have to look at things like extended support or inquiring about exceptions, that kind of thing. So that's our database upgrade recommendation. Now, the other thing I wanted to do with this office hours is give you a very brief overview of how to stay informed on the latest information about upgrades. And the idea here is that we want you to just receive the information without having to go and look for it all the time. So the first and probably best method to get information about database upgrades is to be subscribed to the Upgrade blog. The Upgrade blog is at MikeDietrichDE.com. Mike works for me out of Munich, Germany, well known as a worldwide expert in database upgrades. And you may not realize this, but on the sidebar of the blog, there is a section where you can subscribe to the blog via email, like many blogs have. If you do that, then you'll simply get an email each time that there is a new blog post. And in fact, that email will give you kind of the subject of the post. So you can decide, do you want to go to the blog and read it, or is it maybe about some technical information that doesn't necessarily apply to you? But that's a nice way to be able to stay current on the blog posts that come out a couple or 3 times a week on the Upgrade blog. Another way to stay informed is via Twitter. Now, I'm not the world's biggest Twitter fan. I'm on it kind of because I have to be in a position of being a product manager and so on. And so I have a Twitter feed where I will post about things like our upcoming office hours or events that we have or open world presentations and so on. Mike is a bit more active on his Twitter feed. And you'll see that we do retweet and so on each other just in case we have followers that don't overlap. Those are not super active. They'll get maybe 3 to 5 tweets a week. And both Mike and I are very scrupulous about only putting technical information there. You're not going to find pictures of our latest restaurant meal or discussions about the World Cup or anything like that on our Twitter feeds. It's purely Oracle content. And I've highlighted a few other Oracle Twitter feeds that I think are useful on the other side. The first one, VLDB Bayless, that's Nigel Bayless, our product manager for the Optimizer. I know many of our DBAs are very interested in knowing what's going on with the Optimizer, and this was one of his recent posts. He's not super active there, but every so often he'll post about maybe one of his new blog articles or other information about things like how to gather stats properly, how to set fixed control parameters to get the right optimizer fixes, and so on. Connor McDonald from the Ask Tom team is very active, more developer focused than DBA, but has a lot of information either from kind of the archives of Tom Kite's Ask Tom articles, or you see here things about what to do when you're using Exchange Partition. So he's someone, if you have the time to follow, he has a lot of information that he puts out there, because really getting information out there on Twitter and via blogs is pretty much his job. And then one of the other database product managers that I would suggest following is Dom Giles. He is one of our overall product managers from the database, and his posts about Oracle tend to be more global about database features and so on. But Dom is actually the original author and still maintainer of the Swing Bench utility. Swing Bench, if you don't know it, is one of the tools that people use to generate workloads on the database. So that's an example of something that he posted just a couple of weeks ago about Swing Bench, because we use it, for example, when we're demonstrating our autonomous data warehouse. So there are many useful Twitter feeds out there. If you follow any of the ones I've listed here, and you'll start seeing others that we either like or retweet, you can kind of balance what's your interest, how much time do you want to spend on social media, because frankly, it can be a bit of a black hole, but you can figure out what's useful to you and what isn't. But this might give you a useful starting point. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about in terms of staying informed is the My Oracle Support Hot Topics emails. And this is something that I find a lot of customers aren't aware of, but I find it really useful personally. So I'll show you how to get subscribed to this. First is you log into My Oracle Support, and as you see here, if you pull down under your name, there's the My Account section. Under My Account, you will then get this page. On the left side, under Personal, there's this link for Hot Topics email, which you may never have followed before. But that's where you want to go here. Click on that link for Hot Topics email, and that will give you this page. Now, on this page, you can decide, or you can subscribe to the Hot Topics emails, and you can do it on a weekly or a daily basis. As you see here, I've chosen a daily basis for my emails. And you can choose the content that you want to get and how much of it. I've asked it to send me information about any updates to bugs that I mark as favorites. So for example, if I'm dealing with a customer SR and there's a bug attached to it, I would mark that bug as a favorite, and whenever there's an update to that bug, if it's something that's not from my development group, I would get an email about that. I also have it for documents I've marked as favorites. So as you can imagine, I have that release roadmap note 742.060.1 marked as a favorite. Anytime that note gets updated, I get email. Well, I get it the next day, an email saying that the release roadmap has been updated, and I can go check it to see what has changed. Have we perhaps released on a new platform? Is there a new note about support dates or anything like that? And then at the bottom, I can select the products I'm interested in and the type of information I want to know about those products. And here's where the Hot Topics email will just give you additional information that might be useful to you. So I'm interested specifically in Database Enterprise Edition, and it can choose all sorts of information about that. You may have other topics you're interested in, whether it's specific applications, middleware, Oracle Linux, lots of things that you could choose. And then you can even say how many items you want included in each category. One is what I've chosen to keep my emails brief. If you're doing it weekly, I'd suggest maybe saying 5 or something like that. And then the email you'll get out of this Hot Topics email can be nice and concise. Here's the one I got, I guess this was yesterday. And you'll see here I get one alert on something, and this is about Flex ASM and Cloud Control. I have some bugs that I've marked as being interested in, and this is an update on a merge patch that was produced for one of them, and then a knowledge article that it pulled out for me, and this is about DB time and it's the reference note for how to interpret DB time, what's CPU time versus weights, and so on, and that could be something I might want to read. So the topics, the information I get will change daily. You could do it weekly, but it's a great way to stay on top of things that you might be interested in without having to spend an hour or two every week or every month just looking for new things in My Oracle Support. Once you have your favorites set and your topics set, it will do a very nice job of delivering you information that is relevant to you specifically. So that's really all I had in terms of canned presentation for today. Now, I'd like to invite you to ask questions either via chat or audio. I will say that I do have one question that came in advance via the Ask Tom portal, so I'm going to cover that first. But if anyone online has any questions, please just go to the chat, enter them there, and we will get to them one by one. So the question that we got via the Ask Tom portal, just before this call today, actually, you see it here. And the person is saying that after upgrading a PDB from 12.102 to 12.2, there were a lot of objects in the PDB that were still invalid, and that the typical scripts to recompile them didn't work. And by typical scripts, I assume that means UTLRP. And in this case, it's a real red flag that they even made the issue worse. Some of the objects could be recompiled manually, but some objects insist, like the DBMS X-plan. So that's for your explain plan functionality was invalid, couldn't be recompiled. The CDB itself is completely valid. So the question is there a way to reinstall only specific objects like those having to do with DBMS explain plan? Okay, so given that, here's what I would recommend in this case. And it's really kind of a step-by-step process here, because the very first point is, if you have invalid sys-owned objects after the upgrade, that's a problem. No two ways about it. We never want to have invalid objects that are owned by sys or system in your database. You might have invalid objects owned by your application. That's okay, as long as it doesn't affect the application. But the upgrade, the intent is you start with no invalid objects in sys or system. You should end with no invalid objects in sys or system. So here's how you would go about diagnosing that this particular case. First, let's go back and check your pre-upgrade script to see if there are any problems there. I hate to say it, but all too often we find that customers either don't run the pre-upgrade script and therefore don't know that there were problems in the database before the upgrade, or they run the pre-upgrade script and maybe run the generated fix-up scripts, but they don't go through the pre-upgrade log file to see if there are any things that they need to fix manually. So that first thing to do is just check that pre-upgrade script. Make sure that the database was in good shape before you upgraded it, and make sure that any issues that were identified were addressed before the upgrade, because upgrade is really a garbage in, garbage out scenario. It could be, for example, that you had invalid objects in the system before the upgrade, and that's why we now have invalid objects afterwards. If the pre-upgrade script showed that there were no problems beforehand, then I would check your upgrade logs for errors. The first of those is your cat upgrade logs, and that's pretty obvious. So if there was anything reported during the upgrade, it would be in those logs. Now, if you don't have those logs still available, one thing to note is that during the upgrade, we collect any errors that we find in the registry $error view. So even if you don't have your upgrade logs around, registry $error will contain the errors from your last upgrade. We purge it the next time you restart the upgrade. But this can be a nice safeguard if you don't have your old log files around. And then another thing you can do to look for issues with those objects after the upgrade is you could get the status of the object from obj $. Now, the reason I say get the numeric status there from obj $, you could query DBA objects and say select object name from DBA objects where owner equals sys or owner equals system and status is not equal to valid, right? But the status in DBA objects is not as precise as the numeric status in obj $. So the obj $, status codes, which will be a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, could tell support some valuable information about why that object is not valid, if it's not valid. So that would be an area that we could query. However, we don't expect you to do anything with that object status. It's just kind of a hint that if you open an SR, we may want to get that numeric status from obj $. So if the upgrade log didn't have any errors, now we would want to look at recompilation errors. So after the database upgrade, we always run UTLRP. And if UTLRP is not causing all the objects in sys or system to be valid, then we'd want to see whether there were any recompilation errors. We'd look in the DBA errors view and also the UTL_recomp errors view to see if there's any indication there of why recompilation is either not fixing these objects or, as in the case here, how recompiling things makes it actually worse, because that should never happen. That indicates an issue maybe with recompilation. Now, to reload a component, one of the questions that was asked here is, how can I reload individual objects? If you had an error in an individual component like spatial or Java or OLAP, there's actually a note about that, information on installed database components and schemas. So I give you the reference here. Now, that's not going to be useful in this case because the issue that this customer has seen is with the DBMS Xplan procedure or package, and that's part of the core database. So that's really going to be something that you would address by maybe rerunning catalog or catproc in this case. And that would depend on what exactly is invalid here. If it's just a matter of the package, we could try running catproc.sql. That's catalog procedures. So that would recompile or reload your catalog packages. But if it's something that underlies that package, such as a system table that's not in good shape or something like that, then we might need to run catalog. Not seeing the errors that are involved here, I would not just blindly run catalog in catproc in this case. In this specific case, I would say definitely open an SR. And that's for two reasons. One is you're seeing errors in the core database schemas, sys and system, not even just some component that might be an official Oracle supplied object, but is not the core database. Here we're seeing errors in core objects, and the fact that recompiling actually made it worse, that's a real red flag, as I mentioned earlier, and I would want to open an SR. When you open that SR, what you'd want to have is your pre-upgrade logs, any upgrade logs, and some of the information that I have here, such as the status of those objects from obj $, or a list of errors out of UTL recomp errors. So that's what I have for questions here. And now what I would do is go to the chat and audio questions. So I do have one in chat. So if you have one in audio, just hold off a second and I will cover this, this question that I just got in chat. So the question in chat is, exporting with 6 parallel processes, approximately 120 gig, import loads table data and indexes in under 10 minutes. Constraints hangs for the next 25 minutes until almost completion. 12/2/01 April PSU. What is causing this delay? Wow, that's something I haven't seen before. And Bill's on from the Data Pump Data Pump product manager. Bill, have you seen anything like this before with constraints hanging for that long on such a small import?
No, haven't.
Yeah, in this case, what I would want to see in this case is the import log, and specifically import done with metrics equals yes and log time equal all. Because I want to see whether it's that the constraints themselves are taking that long, or whether it's the thing that's right after constraints that isn't showing up. So that would give us a better sense of what is actually taking that time. And once we had that in the logs, again, metrics equals yes, or metrics equal y, log time equal all, then we could proceed. There was a case where if you have a large master table, doing the master table fix-up at the end of the job could take a very long time. And that would be based on how many metadata objects you have and things like that. I think that can affect 12.2, and we have a patch for that, but that just comes in right at the end of the job, and it comes between the last thing that gets imported, and then just the very final kind of status of the job. And having that metrics equal y and log time equal all will tell me whether that's the problem here. But I have never seen something like this with constraints being such an issue. The only other thing I could see is maybe if one of those constraints, when we're loading it, if we load it and then it gets validated at that point, if there's something that's causing that constraint to take a really long time to validate on whatever table it's defined on, maybe that would show up as well. So first step.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I'd say first step would be to get that log, and then if it is the constraints, we would look at why the constraints are taking that log. Otherwise, we'd look at what came right after it.
It also might be interesting to know if there's like foreign key constraints and large hierarchies of parent-child referential integrity constraints in there that it's trying to process.
Yeah, it also would matter in this case. You're loading 120 gig of table data and indexes, but if those constraints, if that's not into a new database, say it's an existing database, if one of those constraints that's getting loaded is referencing an already existing table that's really long, it might be a performance issue with that constraint. So I guess one other thing I would look at in this case is take an AWR report for the period of this import. Given that this whole import is happening in maybe 35 minutes, you could do that with just a 1 hour or a 30-minute period for the AWR report, and that would show us what's taking the time here. Is it SQL execution on evaluating constraints? Is it a wait event? Maybe there's some sort of contention going on during that import, something like that. So sorry, I can't give you a clean answer there, but I can at least tell you how we would approach that going forward. And again, if you want to follow up on that by sending us mail directly, we're happy to look at that. So are there any other questions that folks might have about, as you saw, data pump in this case, about SQL Loader, database upgrade, and anything in this area? Okay, well, not seeing any questions out there, not hearing any. I'll thank everybody for attending this edition of Office Hours. I don't think we're going to have one in October just because it would end up being the week right before Open World, and frankly, there's just too much going on at that point. So our next one will be in November, and we hope to see you then in a virtual sense. And I hope this was useful. So thanks a lot.